Hey guys, back with another video, and it has been a while since I have done a book video. I know I said back in February that I was working on doing my monthly TBRs and wrap-ups, but it proved a lot harder to maintain than I thought. So instead of saying that that is something that I'm going to do every month, I'm going to say that it's something that I'm going to try my best to do every month with the TBRs and the wrap ups. So this video is a January to, because I also realized in my February TBR video, I never gave you the wrap up from my January video. So this is a wrap up video from January until July. So from January to July. I have been reading. I have been doing a lot more Bible studies. So some of the books that I read are not on my Goodreads. I have to figure out how to put them in. Last year when I read books of the Bible, I had to go in and figure out how to put those in and do the translations in order for them to count towards my reading goal. So I will have to figure that out because I have completed the book of Deuteronomy and I believe it's First and Second Kings, and now I am on First Samuel. So I've read all of those. I've been doing studies with those. I am actually doing a 365 day to 365 day reading Bible studies with the Bible app, the YouVersion Bible app. And one of them is called As It Happens. And that one takes me through some of the books of the Bible in like as the whole book. And then sometimes it's like chopped up throughout the entire 365 days. So the ones that are chopped up through the 365 days, I don't count. But the ones that are like all in order within the month that I'm reading, I will count that as part of my reading goal, if that makes sense. If what I just said that makes sense. So if it doesn't make sense, for example, in I believe it was June. So in the entire month of June, I read Second Kings because at the time that I was reading during the study, Second Kings was the only thing that I read. So that I counted that towards my reading goal for January. So hopefully that makes sense. So now I'm going to get into all the things that I've read. I'm using my Goodreads app on my Kindle, but my Kindle is also almost dying. So I'm going to try to get through as much of my wrap up list as possible before it dies. So I made a list, but then I realized after I made this list that all the books on this list are also on my Goodread, but there are some books that are not on this list that's on the Goodread. And those books are the books that I read to my class or I had to read during my STEM certification class, and I just counted it towards my Goodreads goal because I still have to read the book even though it's a child's book, and even though we have to dissect it to form lesson plans, I still read it, so it's counting. So let me go all the way back to I read a lot, guys. I read a lot. All right. So, I do have most of these books in physical form, but they are in the bedroom with my husband. He works a night shift, so he's sleeping. I have to start getting up at 5:30 in the morning because I am now moving from elementary school 5th grade to middle school 6th grade. So I am trying to get myself acclimated with the waking up early in the morning. And this is one of the things that I'm doing right now to keep myself awake. And I also look through my channel and realize that I had not done a book video in a while. So this will also keep me awake. I am not trying to take a nap at all. I'm trying to make it through the entire day because I can't take a nap when I'm working. Um, so, the first book that I have is Black Cake. Hopefully, you'll be able to see that. So, this book, and by the way, before I continue, I'm not going to give very long descriptions because there's a lot of books. But Black Cake, I do love. I feel like I might have mentioned this book on this channel already as a book that I was about to read and started to read, or maybe I mentioned it in December as a book that I've already read. I actually can't remember, but I do know that I read it again in January, because there were still some parts of it that I was just like not really sure about. I think I wasn't paying attention to during that time because the initial read through, I felt like I jumped and there were parts that I didn't realize had happened. So I had to go back, and instead of just constantly going back, I just read it a second time and actually paid attention to it. I really liked the book. I recommend it. It was mostly about these two siblings who just could not stand each other because they're pretty much, the way I see it, they were jealous of each other. Their mom passed away, and it brought out a lot of things that they needed to talk about. And by the end of the book, they were, I won't say the best of friends, but they definitely started to see each other in a different light, and it brought the family back together. Because it really revolved a lot around customs of a different religion, or not religion, well, religion and culture. So these are immigrants that moved to the United States, but their children grew up in the United States with their customs from their land, and being raised that way, from what I gather from friends of mine that I have, that parents were immigrants to the United States. It is a very different way of being raised. You're still being raised with your customs of your homeland, but you're living in a different place. So the influence of the land that you live in becomes a clash. And so disagreements with the father led to the siblings being estranged, and then they come back, and the only glue that was really holding them together was their mom. So the mending of the family started with the mom, and the pastor helped them along the way. I believe it was the pastor. So really good book. I gave it a 5-star, or 5-star on Goodreads. So sorry about that. That was a call that came in. But again, a really good book. I recommend. 5-star is what I gave it on Goodreads. So I do recommend it. All right, next. The Other Black Girl. So I did not end up DNFing this book. I kind of wanted to. It was slow in some areas, and when I say slow, for me, it was really slow in some areas, and then it picked up in other areas. I just don't like how the two black girls in this company were pretty much pinned against each other. But what's crazy is that that is not something that is unheard of in the black community. We, in the black community, I feel like there are a lot of times that instead of like encouraging each other, building each other up, being, friends with each other, even with disagreements, that there's a whole lot of like talking about each other, putting each other down, shunning people from like, you're not black enough to be in the black community, all that stuff, right? So a person or two people that are black but different styles in the same community are fighting for this position. One comes out on top, one moves to a different company. I just don't like, I didn't like it. It wasn't for me. I didn't hate it because I kept going. It was enough to pull me along to get me through the book. So I did give it a 3 stars. It is not a book that I would reread. And usually books that I give 3 stars to 5 stars, I keep on my shelf. I'm actually not sure if this is one I'm going to keep on my shelf because I'm not sure if I will go back to this book. It just did not do it for me. It didn't. Next, Tristan Strong Destroys the World. This is book number 2 in the Tristan Strong series. Absolutely loved it. I gave it a 5-star. It was action-packed from the very beginning to the end, but it was consistent in taking you through his journey of grief and growth, and having to deal with everyday life as a teenager, and not a high school teenager. I believe he was a middle school teenager, going through grief and learning from it, and overcoming the struggle of wanting to stay in the depression, or the I don't care what the world does because I'm sad. So really, really good. I do love it. I do have to say that, like I said with the first book, you have to read the audiobooks along with this, because there are some words in there that you will not be able to pronounce on your own, because they are words from like an African language. And I honestly can say that if I did not have the audiobook, some of the story would be lost on me because of pronunciation. And that's because of the way my mind reads. Most people probably would not, and this wouldn't be a big deal, but with the way my mind reads, if I stumble on a word, I can't get past it, which means that everything else falls at the wayside. So for me personally, I had to have the audiobook, and then once I had the audiobook, now I can go back and read this on my own without the audiobook, and I'll be fine. But great read. I highly recommend this series to any teenager, any teacher who wants a good series for their child to read. Next one, Lore. I didn't think I was going to get through this book. I saw my January and my February TBR videos, and I didn't think I was going to get through it. I went through this book like this. It is based on Greek mythology, so if you don't have an interest in Greek mythology, and you don't know a lot about Greek mythology, some of this would be lost on you, but not all. I do feel like you can read this aside from knowing a whole lot about Greek mythology, but it definitely helps tremendously if you know. I gave it a 5 stars. I recommend it. I loved it. All right, this is one of the books that we had to read to our students, and we did some lesson planning on. What was that lesson planning? We did lesson plans on, and did worksheets and all that stuff with. This is Voice of Freedom. Really good book. My students love this book, so I gave it a 5 stars. I love the book, so I also gave it a 5 stars because of that. There was a lot in it that we learned that I did not know, and my students didn't either, so we kind of learned some things together. I'm going to read you my brief overview that I put on Goodreads of this. Is that this is a powerful read. I had never heard of this woman, and whoa, I wish I had. It's a different perspective and an encouragement to continue to work harder to spread love and not hate, because hate is ugly, tiring, and uncalled for. We are better united, not separated, and this story of someone's life should be proof enough for us to not go backward, but go forward. That's how much I highly recommend that book is read. Next one, we also did this one for science with our students. So there was also lesson planning and lessons and all that jazz with this. And this is called Buzzing with Questions, The Inquisitive Mind of Charles Henry Turner. This year, I had the privilege of being on a team of lovely women who wanted to do Black History Month with names that aren't heard often in the mainstream when it comes to Black history. And Charles Henry Turner was one of them. I will read to you my review on this one. It is brief. This is a beautiful history, science, and ELA mentor text. So if you are looking for one book that hits all of those and you are integrating your subjects, you can definitely do it with this book. I did it with fifth graders. This is also something that can go into more depth with sixth graders and middle schoolers. Even high schoolers, I feel like if you just need a backstory and you want a more in-depth lesson. But I'm sure there are other picture books that you can do with high schoolers. And yes, I'm saying picture books because sometimes if you know what time we're working with, if you're a teacher, you know, if you have worked in a school building, then you know, you worked in education, then you know. Sometimes a chapter book will take more than the amount of days that you need, and it is easier to get a picture book to do your background knowledge and hit the ground running with whatever project you need. So again, this is a beautiful history, science, and ELA mentor text. My students were sitting upright, eyes fixed on the screen to listen to things that they had never heard of and to learn about a person in Black history that isn't brought up very often. It makes me happy because I personally love science. So to have a text that touches on all three of my favorite subjects is amazing. Great text, highly recommend. And yes, when I tell you that they were sitting on the edge of their seats, if you know, then you know, especially this school year or this past school year and the one before and during COVID, it is very hard to get students interested in reading things that is outside something that they personally want to read. So this did it for them, and that was pretty awesome. Next, we also read this one to our class. I believe it is called Solway, and it is by, I'm not going to butcher this, but if you watch Black Panther, the lady that T'Challa was in love with, she was the author of this book. I don't want to butcher anybody's name, but I think it's Lupita, but I'm not going to pronounce her last name because I wouldn't even know how to do that. So I'm not going to do that. But great text. I gave this a 5-star as well. This is my Goodreads summary. I wish my friends and family had a book like this when we were younger. They could see themselves as I do, and some of them wouldn't have so much anger. I've always seen them as the beauties and handsome men God has made them to be. God is our beholder and the beauty in the eye of the beholder. So the reason that was my description, and I try to make it as quick as possible because I was also at work putting this in during my lunchtime. This book touches on a young lady growing up with dark skin and being outcast by people around her for having darker skin. We know that there is colorism within the Black community, and then outside of the Black community, we know that there is racism based on our skin color. We don't need that within any community. And this book just takes you to the journey through this young lady, little girl, loving herself and loving her skin color because that is what God gave her. And I just thought it was beautiful and amazing. And I highly recommend. All right, next, I read Legendborn. Just like this, super fast, 5 stars, great book. This book is a young adult novel, middle grade can also read this. There was nothing in it that was, middle grade and high school can also read this. There was nothing in it that was inappropriate. There's Black history in it. There's history in it. There is interracial history in it where an interracial couple are trying to date each other and all of the things that come from both sides with that. Acceptance from one side, not acceptance from the other side. There is grief. There is trying to hide your, like the trope of trying to hide your magical world from your non-magic friends, family folk. There is so much impacted or in this text. Great read. And I will be reading Bloodmark. I just have not gotten around to it. I was wanting to read it during, I believe it was March, is what I originally wanted to read it in. I have not gotten a chance to get to it, but great read. Highly recommend. Cicely Tyson, Just As I Am. She was a legend, and she left her mark. This, I gave her book a 5 stars. I give all memoirs or biographies, autobiographies 5 stars, because even if I disagree with the person's viewpoint on life and the things that they did, it's hard to give someone's life story a 1. I may not, I may loathe the person by the time I am done reading their memoir or autobiography, but that's their life and that's their viewpoint on life and based on their interactions and the information that they're told and they're raised with. So I will always give those 5 stars. But let me tell you, I gave her a 5 star because there were a lot of things that she did that I disagreed with, because I was like, I would never put myself in that sort of position to be mentally abused in the way that she was. But I know some of that was her upbringing, but the part where she chose, I was just like, you are a strong person. But I think it's a great read if you have ever loved Cicely Tyson as an actress or as a person in mainstream Hollywood that represented herself, or if you think that she represented the Black culture very well, I would recommend this. It humanizes her, and I don't mean that Hollywood dehumanizes people, but Hollywood and the mainstream media will only show you so much. This actually gives you an insight on her, and I appreciated it because it does be like, oh, I disagree with that. She isn't this person that we put her on the altar to be, but at the same time she is, because she fought for, at least for me, because she fought for her religious foundation the entire way through her journey to Hollywood and through Hollywood, and I appreciated that. So yeah. Next one, we also read this in our classrooms. And this gives a little bit of history on the Muslim religion. And yes, I am a Christian, but I have students that were not. And this was one of the books that we chose to read to show our students that we see them. So Golden Domes and Silver Lanterns, a Muslim Book of Colors. So we did this one as history, but also as history of like holidays, of religious observations. And I gave it a 4 stars because there were some things in there that were still a little confusing, but I think it's because it was a child's book, and I think it was okay. It wasn't like terrible or anything like that. And the kids that love it, they absolutely loved it. The next one we did was Helen Keller. And we read this book to also show that our students who have disabilities that were in my classroom, that we also see them, that they can still do a lot and they can be an impact on the world even with their disabilities, because Helen Keller was blind. So that was awesome, and my students absolutely loved that one as well, because they were just like in awe that she was able to do so much. Next, I have Malala's Magic Pencil. And we should all know the story of Malala. She was an advocate for women's rights, girls' rights, and she was shot in the head. She was Muslim, and she was in a country that ISIS was big in, still probably I think is big in. So my students really enjoyed learning about a person in a different culture. They were really taken back by, or they were really taken aback. They were really sad, and they did not understand why things were the way they were during the time that Malala and the other young girls like her went through this. Um, they did not get it. They didn't understand it. My students were furious. The boys in my classroom were furious. Like, I think they were more mad than the girls, and the girls were pretty upset. They were like, they just didn't understand. And I think they didn't understand because they see themselves as boys and girls in a classroom learning together, and they just did not understand why this young lady did not have that same opportunity, and why it was taken away from her, why, you know, this dominance, and or for no reason at all, because it was like, well, the boys that were a part of ISIS weren't going to school, but you know, there were men like her father who fought for it. So they just, their eyes were open, and it was a great discussion. They even went home and talked to their parents about it, and came back and discussed some conversations that they had with their parents. So it was pretty cool. Tristan Strong keeps punching. Great. Need I say more? Nope, because I said it all with the first one. Continue. Somebody's waking up, so I'm trying to get through these. That's not the version that I read, but that was the only version I could find. And my son read that, and he liked it, and I read it with him. Chicken Sunday, we read that, and it was about a white girl who grew up in a black family, and it was great. My students love that. Amari and the Night Brothers, my students love that, and I was the one that chose to read that one on my own independent reading time. Boy Who Harnessed the Wind, we read this together for science, and we even did a science project with it to build our own wind turbines. And to go along with that book, we read Energy Island. That helped with our wind turbines. And I may have to pause this in a second because I believe somebody is waking up. Addie Matic and the Toasterific. This was a Rue Goldberg book that we read for STEM certification training. Really good. I recommend that. And another book that I read for STEM certification training was Rosie Revere, Engineer. Also Rue Goldberg, but also Engineering Design Cycle. I talked about this book already on this channel. Go back and look at my February TBR. But Babel, look, I'm rereading it. Not just yet because I got to finish some other books, but it's really good. Just finished House of Hunger. It was okay. It was not bad, not great. I gave it 4 stars. It was okay. I wanted to give it a 3.5, but I couldn't, so I gave it a 4. I've Got Rhythm. Just read this for my STEM training, and it was novel engineering, the book that we chose for novel engineering. And then lastly, I just finished reading this with my small group at church and my church as a whole, How to Worship Like a King. Great. I gave it a 4 stars because there were some things the author said that I didn't agree with. That was more like personal feelings that kind of teetered the line of like religious text, what the text said, and its personal feelings, and it teetered the line, and it wasn't like, this is how the scripture is and this is how I'd apply it to my life. It was a blended line, and sometimes it's hard to discern if you yourself don't have a foundation in studying the Bible and taking the text for what the text says. So those are everything that I read from January to July. And let me know what you think of these books in the comments. And if you are not already subscribed, please subscribe. And then I will see you back later with my Christian Readathon TBR for August. So until then, bye.